Well, hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this interview with Christina Davidson, who I have here. My name is Charlotte Mullane. I'm the partnership coordinator here at Hope Chapel, and we really just wanted to do these videos to have some testimonies from the recent trips to Rwanda and Guatemala and Scotland and as well as Thailand. We've been all around the world in the month of February, and we're really excited. And so we wanted to have this opportunity to hear some stories this way, because then you can hear a little bit more in depth of what we really were a part of last month in a way that you can just watch this at home or wherever you're at. And so, so today, representing the Rwanda team, the Good Rain team, is Christina Davidson. She serves as our worship director here at Hope. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to explain to me just kind of, and everybody, that just what Good Rain means, what is that project, why Rwanda, how did that kind of come to be?
We really didn't begin by sort of targeting Rwanda. What began as Good Rain, as we know it now, began actually in 2010 when Neil went with Neil Heron, actually, and some others to Rwanda on a vision tour, really. And there were some medical personnel, a nurse midwife, physician, and just sort of the experience when they got there really began to shape their understanding of the needs. And so Neil in particular met with several pastors and actually was introduced to a ministry partner now that we have. He's an overseer of a network of churches called Harvest Christian Churches. And so he talked with several church pastors and realized that even though the country is highly evangelized, the churches themselves didn't at that time have a lot of biblical depth or maturity. By their own admissions, pastors would sort of open the Bible, point to a phrase, and just really kind of yell and scream about that for I don't know, an hour or so. And so through a lot of conversations and some good questions asked, Neil began to realize that there was just a real need for biblical teaching and helping the churches get strengthened, and particularly in their pastoral leadership. Then the pastor said to Neil, well, we would like you to be a good rain. And Neil said, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, a good rain is one that comes back and continues to nourish and promote growth. And so from there, the next year in 2011, Neil went back and actually stayed 5 weeks and taught several books of the Bible. And they met in a very rustic place outside, I'll use that word, outside of the city. And those relationships just began to grow. And I actually went my first time then in 2011 and accompanied Lisa Aubin, who was a certified nurse midwife, and she was doing some equipping of local midwives. And so we went to some very remote areas, and she did some just very basic hygienic techniques and practices to prevent postpartum bleeding. And I was the model, the mother, had giving birth on the table, and that was just quite an experience. But beyond that, as we began to go back, Neil has been, I think this was his 15th time my 10th this past February. John and Peggy Scudieri have been multiple times. John, I don't know, somewhere over a dozen times, and several others have been part of that process each year, and each has had a different emphasis. But we also realized that a lot of the women leaders in the churches could really wanted just some encouragement, some teaching. And so we began to meet with women leaders each year, also in the different regions outside the city and inside the city. There are several neighborhoods in the capital of Kigali that are characterized by very different need, very different economic demographics, to be frank. And so that really grew, and Peggy has just taken on the language, and she's really taught me. And from some of those experiences over the years too, we realized that there were some other things that we could participate in with them, and that included providing scholarships for secondary education for the pastors. And now that's actually become a requirement for them to even have part of a undergraduate college education and certification for churches to reopen. I'll say something about that, I'm sure, in just a minute.
Yeah.
We did bought some goats that they could
Nice.
breed and then pass on, and there was milk, which was very valuable. We provided some hunger relief that was very critical during COVID. And that's just been a real privilege to see those needs and see the generosity of people to meet those needs financially too as we've gone back. So that's really been, I think, what it's been. Oh, one thing I want to mention is another thing was a lot of women, because of the genocide, and we really can't continue or have an effective relationship with Rwanda unless we have some kind of glimpse into how the genocide has impacted the country.
Definitely.
We still can't even imagine the devastation or the recovery that's been required for reconciliation and forgiveness. But as a part of that, partnering with our friends in Rwanda, we've been able to provide microloan, called micro seeds, money to cohorts of women who they have a collaborative that they're encouraging one another, praying together, holding each other accountable, but they're from this loan are paying the capital needed for to have like a vendor's booth in the market and to pay taxes, and as a result, rather than to having to resort to other employment that's really hurtful for them, say prostitution, and many women are HIV positive as a result of that, to have more gainful opportunity for employment, that they can also buy their family's food, pay for school fees and clothing and things. So that's a whole lot of everything,
amazing.
but
Yeah,
mainly teaching the pastors and encouraging women leaders, and then having 2 marriage conferences.
that too.
We're able to do that.
It's
So
pretty incredible. Yeah.
it's been very
I'd
exciting
argue
and
it's
a real
great reign.
privilege.
Yeah.
It's an amazing country.
Yeah.
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 And people.
And I think the balance of somehow being able to meet tangible needs at the same time as spiritual needs just go hand in hand, being
Right.
the hands and feet of Jesus, but also the heart of Jesus, really, and the mind sometimes as well, of just the teaching, the in-depth teaching that Pastor Neil's given as well, and then just the women you're reaching as well. It's just pretty incredible.
We're hoping. How can you say, go in peace when they're hungry?
Yes. Yep.
And so
you just have to meet those
right.
side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's
Absolutely.
good. And as an encouragement too, I know, so each year as a part of the Giving Tree emphasis, we have highlighted the Rwandan pastors. So if you've given to any of the Rwandan pastor Giving Tree ornaments,
Thank you
those
so much.
specifically have gone, usually we'll do a bag of rice for the families of the pastors.
Yes.
And a nice shirt.
A 50-pound bag of rice, a shirt for pastors, fabric for some of the women pastors, and just meeting lots of needs.
Sometimes scholarships, like you mentioned,
Yep,
part of that.
Very specific.
So continue blessing in that way as well with this
Yes.
ministry and just a personal testimony of that.
Thank you for remembering that.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, so my first time going was in 2022, and I remember Neil invited me and we were driving around, and he just told me, he's like, none of what you see was here. When we started,
Oh, boy.
he was talking about having to go up to a mountain to get cell service, and now we have Wi-Fi in the house. And so from 2022, when I first saw the country, to, when you guys were starting, years before that, how have you really seen, just in general, changes in Rwanda, but then also currently what's kind of going on there church-wise?
Yeah, I mean, even since 2022, but especially since 2011, that I have seen just amazing changes, mostly in the city. There's high rises, there's high-end apartment buildings, there's just very high-end retail stores that you just wouldn't imagine. And so even though there's a lot of development that's taking place, also in the rural areas with some cleaner water and access to healthcare, but still between the city and the country, the urban areas and the rural areas, there's the richer are becoming richer, and the poor. That gap is that divide is widening. The more every year that we see. though the country as a whole is, and these are the words of the president, developing much more, but it's at a cost, and people are displaced out of their homes, which weren't safe, but are relocated into housing developments now, or apartments. Even each year we'll go and we'll say, oh, that used to be this empty field and now it's this huge store, and so there's a lot of good with that we've seen, but there's a lot of hardship also. And as a result of wanting, so here's some very specific examples of the president and the government wanting the country to be elevated, especially as they came out of the genocide, and so much has happened good that way. But wants sort of appearances to be very good. For example, he wants to relocate the airport, the international airport, outside of the city, but there are buildings there that they don't really want dignitaries flying over and looking down and saying, what is that? And so, for example, one church, Pastor Aron, out near, there's Goma and Gisenyi, are almost like twin cities on the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo and western, northern Rwanda. And there's a church there, and they've said to that church, you need to build a balcony, you need to build a whole new structure, a 2-story, and so and the pastor was saying that it's going to require $70,000 US dollars for renovation, which is just crazy. Yeah. And so
impossible, really.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of development, but it's come at a cost, and the churches that are closed now are, the number is just immense. It's a majority of the churches, and we found out it's not just evangelical churches. It happens to be mosques, Anglican churches, Catholic churches, though somehow the Jehovah's Witnesses got a special, they're reopened, but the requirements for reopening are not unreasonable for safety, structural things, bathroom facilities, education for pastors to really be speaking truth and not be just saying untruth and, give me a lot of money and you'll get this blessing kind of thing. But the logistical requirements are so burdensome for these churches to reopen that it almost seems impossible. And so there was a lot of discouragement among the pastors. And so the time spent with them, particularly on Neil's behalf, was not just he taught Malachi and Revelation, but there was a lot of encouragement going on and worship, but also just some leadership principles to see how can we still be the church and Christians, even though we can't meet physically. Yeah, so
it's interesting. And sometimes I feel like those things happen and you ask the question, maybe how is God using this, right? And so perhaps it is that to learn before they get the building back how to be the church outside the building. It's an interesting thing. So yeah, so you mentioned a little bit about Pastor Neil. He went through Malachi with them, encouragement, Book of Revelation as well. It's a tough one. But what else for this specific February 2026 trip? What were really the projects or the goals of your time there? What kinds of things did you guys do this year?
Yeah, so the pastor's teaching was really central to the whole project, and John and Peggy and others really helped us prepare for that, and helped Neil particularly. And so he taught 6-7 long days. Throw in a 4-hour worship service with that, but it was a joy to him, I know, even though it was physically taxing. So they met at and focus on the teaching also. They also get meals during that time, and probably in food quantities and quality that they don't usually get where they live. So Neil did a lot of reading in preparation for that, and then I was able to go meet with some of the micro seed loan recipients in some of the markets in the specifically Kimisagara area and also Kimironko, which are different neighborhoods of the city. And really, they take like an hour to drive between one and the other. And those women are amazing, particularly the Kimironko. I would come up and they'd be so busy that they'd be 5 customers deep, and I couldn't really talk to them,
Oh,
but I
wow.
was able to
That's
just
great.
go where they were and ask them some questions like, what does it mean to be a Christian businesswoman? How does that shape your practices? And they would talk about things like the quality of the product, my honesty in the financial dealings, that I value my character and reputation, and that so as a result I have repeat customers and things. And so I was able to really ask them how being a Christian and being in the marketplace, literally, how that shapes.
Yeah.
Pray with them, ask how I could pray for them down the future, and that was a real joy to do. And then during the longer week portion we were there, I met with women leaders in the churches, and I taught on, and out of Acts 16, I think it says 16, on Lydia.
Oh, yeah.
And so she was a businesswoman
Purple cloth.
and a dealer in purple cloth. And
Yeah.
actually, the first church in Europe started out of her home, because first she was listening
That's
to
right.
Paul's message of truth. God worked in her heart to respond and faith and open her heart. And then she became just an outpost, a lighthouse for a church that grew. And so the letter to the church at Philippi, the Philippians church, really started in her home. And so seeing and asking these women to really look in themselves and say, well, am I really a Christian? Have I really responded in faith to the message of the truth of the gospel of Jesus?
Yeah.
And then another day, so I met with 3 church groups with that, and they're all in different places, and some more rural than others. And then one day I was able to talk about, we talked about what is the gospel, and we did the colors of the gospels, symbolizing different truths of the gospel as a bracelet, so that they would have an understanding, hopefully then of themselves, but also we role played sharing with one another what that means. And so that was a real joy. We visited some people who've really become like family to us now, even there in the city, and we had some fun. So yeah, it was very fully packed, and
Definitely. It sounds busy. Yeah.
and
That's great, though.
just wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that business's missions of like a reminder, biblically, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it for the glory of God, right? And so I love that you had this, while this pastoral conference is happening of real biblical leaders in the church setting, you
so
also
critical.
have a church setting, but you also have a business setting, the public setting, that you can be witnesses wherever God has placed you. And I love that. That's really, really good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Were there any like stories or just an experience that really impacted you this time around, of just something that just kind of stuck with you that you'd want to share?
Yeah, it was hard to pinpoint one. But in my conversations with women, a couple things that stood out. We visited an area called Nyamata, and actually that word is built on milk, Amata, and but it's a large village, and there's a very large genocide memorial there. So that's a constant reminder to remember what happened and where they've come since then. But those women, it was about 14 of them, and I think they were all between like the ages of 25 and 35, and most of them were leading their home on their own as single parents. So they might be married or have a man who's living with them, but they were, alcoholism is really a tough challenge now, as this is one negative of a country that's developing, like the West. And so there were several stories of their husbands would come home late at night from the bars, and if that particular woman would not serve him, not have sex with him, she would be kicked out and have to sleep outside. And that was a common experience. And they were saying, how do we show grace as Christians to these men? And then another story which we encountered on the last Sunday we were there. We drove down to an area about 10-minute drive from the Burundi border. And it's a community called Batima. And so there's some developing things that are happening around there. We saw a big poultry farm was being constructed, and not far from that church, which is closed right now, that not far from their church, they're doing some mining of different mineral resources that are there. And so that company in particular would hire Rwandese men to come, and they might have a 6-month contract. And as a process to that, as part of that, they would seek out young girls, really underage girls, coerce them, pay them, rape them. Really, let's just call it what it is. And these young girls would become pregnant. And so here they are, 14, 15, with children, little to no education. And that church down there, that pastor and wife there realize, man, it's just so hard. That even though they're closed, they could do something very tangible. And so that Harvest Christian Church Network in Rwanda bought 20 sewing machines for these young girls and gave them training. And so now they have this skill that they can make unique products and bring to the market that's there, and really begin to have a hope of feeding their families. So that was just a very tangible expression of a church being the church. They would have done this regardless of, but seeing the need. But and the main message from that whole time there was that as a Christian, you don't cease being a Christian or a follower of Jesus because I don't have a church to go to. And the church no longer, it doesn't cease to be the church, even though it doesn't have a building. And so, that was a pervasive message, and one that we really tried to hit home and be encouraging with. But we're slowly seeing the church be the church, even though they're up against these obstacles to meet again. So that was very encouraging to see, and just see the fruit of that. And
it's incredible what you're doing. And also very heavy though as well, having to experience all of that and
the reality of that.
And I think some prayer points as a part of that, obviously for those watching as well, just praying for, so when we're talking about the genocide, it's 1994, so 32 years is just the span of time really that has been. So just continued prayer for forgiveness and reconciliation and unity, and those who are still mourning, family and friends and neighbors, and so much of that is still affecting so many. And so prayers for that. I would say prayers for these microseeds women, whether they're in the city or out near the Burundi border as well. Just prayers for their businesses to continue to grow and do well.
Yes, please.
I'd say prayers for the pastors. I believe, was it 78 or is it more than?
I think 79.
79,
it was,
So the 78 pastors, 79 pastors, as they are back in their local regions and now have this knowledge of 2 more books of the Bible, and just praying for them and their families and their regions, and obviously for churches to open again, as much as they can be the body of Christ without it. The building, we know, just helps.
Serving their community, still reaching out and meeting within the what they can do legally, and but for prayer and encouragement and Bible study. But they're really down in a lot of ways. So thank you for that, asking for that prayer.
Definitely. Well, I guess the last thing, we'll just kind of wrap up with this. As someone watching this, what would you say, so that we talk about this local context and kind of Acts 1:8 of how we're supposed to reach our Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then the ends of the earth. And it's a commission. It can be overwhelming at times, it seems, but then we also, as a church here at Hope Chapel and beyond, we have to figure out this balance of serving locally, serving, nationally even, and then internationally. And so for you, how has going to the field, and even maybe going to the field multiple times, how has it shaped your perspective of God, or changed your perspective of God or his mission or anything like that? And maybe for someone watching, as encouragement to maybe go to the field.
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember talking one time with our main ministry partner. His name is Tofil, and he's the overseer of the Harvest Christian Network. And he said, Christina, if you were to live here 20 years, you would still never understand our culture and the worldview. And so I thought, wow, well, I've been 10 times. I know, I've been 10 times.
You're almost hitting that.
And every year we discover some new thing. But so I think just from a practical standpoint, it's taught me that I can be pretty selfish about my conveniences and comforts.
That's hard.
I mean, really.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, just from bathrooms to clothing to food, really, we just get so self-consumed. And so seeing others who do not derive their joy from material things or happiness or those kinds of things, and their circumstances was a real knock in the head. And then just seeing that God is the God of the nations, and that the gospel, the truth of God coming to earth, and those is transcendent above culture. But there's also beauty in culture, but there's great difficulty when culture and cultural religion are intrinsically just tied up and enmeshed, where becoming a Christian means literally extracting yourself from your community, your family, and at great cost and risk. And so I've really become to appreciate that much more. And also just it's given me even more of a local urgency about my own neighbors, about my own family members and friends, that we all need a Savior. Amen. And Jesus is that solution that God has provided. There's goodness in us, but we're not righteous. And because of sin and selfishness, but God came in the form of a man to save us and to die for us. And so that's a universal message. And even just being away internationally has given me even more hope and urgency and love for the people that God's put me among in my daily life. So, yeah, great question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing today.
Thanks a lot.
Just giving us a testimony of, there's probably so much more, but just a glimpse at what God's doing in Rwanda and through Hope Chapel through that as well.
Yeah, but we're grateful.
We're praying for more to have the opportunities to be able to see those things.
Would love to take more folks there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, we're excited.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Char.
Thanks for watching this interview.
Thank you very much.